Christmas Bloody Christmas is a simple little festive film set on Christmas Eve about a killer robot Santa. That's pretty much it. He kills a bunch of people and he's got green laser eyes. So let's talk about it. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter and joining me for this festive edition is Tim.
Hello, happy holidays.
This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a horror movie, and on this episode, obviously it's Christmas season, we're doing another Christmas horror movie. We're going to be talking about Christmas Bloody Christmas, which was a new Shudder release at the time of recording just this past weekend, although it's another week before you get your grubby little mitts on this Christmas present. But we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers. But yeah, we're going to talk about it. The premise of this one is fairly simple. There is a robot Santa at a toy store that has been a repurposed robot from the military that goes haywire and starts killing people on Christmas Eve. That's the premise. That's just the synopsis. That's all you need to know. We'll get into it. So I will start with the question that I always do. Tim, what did you think of Christmas Bloody Christmas?
Now, in order to
oh god, sometimes I just can tell you're going to go on like a long monologue. Like just there's a tone at the start of it.
Just in order to properly examine this movie, we must first properly examine my past.
What?
Holy crap, the main girl in this movie reminded me so much of an ex I had. It was it was like really distracting, because it's like not just in like, you know, not just like looks wise or attitude wise or whatever. It was like, oh, like they looked very similar, they acted like the exact same way, like, you know, a lot of little like just a lot of the things they did and like cadences and stuff, you know, very similar attitude. And yeah, I'll admit I found it a little distracting while watching this movie. You know, trying to enjoy this movie with my wife, and it's trying to bring back, you know, memories of lovers past.
Did you mention this fact to your wife whilst watching?
Of course, yeah.
Did she think it was funny, or was she uncomfortable by the whole affair?
No, she thought it was interesting. You know? Sometimes that's the word
affair was not chosen intentionally in a sort of punny way for the record.
I don't think my wife and I really are that much of the jealous type. Like, especially if you're talking about exes, you know, it's like,
oh sure,
who cares? Yeah, that's so much in the past. So yeah, I actually did find that a little distracting, but I mean, otherwise, with that stuff aside, I thought it was a pretty fun movie. I think this is the third movie I've seen from Joe Begos,
a director. Sure. Yeah, Joe. I actually didn't realize it was him. I didn't remember his name, but when I looked him up afterwards, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the guy that did Bliss and VFW.
Yeah, which I like both those movies quite a bit, and I thought this was mostly good. I do think it takes a while to get to it's a very short movie, but in a way it almost feels like a slow burn, because it kind of felt like it was taking a while to get to the killer Santa. But I mean, maybe that was just me, because I was like going down all these romantic memories.
I also noticed at some point, I think she mentioned she was from Rhode Island at one point.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if because she said something about having like a Rhode Island accent, and I don't know if that was supposed to mean that this takes place in Rhode Island, or if she's someone who moved to wherever this is from Rhode Island. Which I don't think I realized it at first, but I think apparently Joe is a Rhode Island guy. Which is surprising. I never met him.
What, is Rhode Island that small?
It's pretty small, but we're also both, you know, pretty big fish.
Oh yes, of course. You know. Yes, I'm sure he's heard of Tim Vargilish.
Yeah, it's like the same way I'm sure, you know, you and Mark Millar get along.
Oh yeah, me, Mark Miller, Grant Morrison, and what's his face, Gerard Butler, all good buddies.
But yeah, I think I did find maybe a little bit of the lead up between the two main characters to be a little cloying. There was a point where I was definitely, all right, can you two just like shut up and get it on? Like it's very obvious like that you're into each other. But I mean, once that stuff starts and once the the Robo Santa killing starts, it's a lot of fun. And I like that. It's like a very cheesy premise, but they don't really like focus on it too much. Like there's not really a convoluted backstory. You just kind of hear like these little snippets, like on the part of the news broadcast or whatever.
Well, it's actually it's the opening's kind of almost like a little RoboCop. It's just someone like flicking through commercials, and just the last one is the advert for these Santas that are going to be in malls and toy stores because it'll keep your children safe from those no good for nothing mall Santas who they hire bums to be those Santas, so they're dangerous.
Yeah, so that's kind of funny because in a way it does feel a little RoboCop-ish like that, but
just that first part, like the rest of it doesn't feel like RoboCop at all. Just that first minute feels RoboCop, and then the rest is other things.
I guess that's fair. I mean, you get a little bit of like robot vision, like it's not the same as like RoboCop necessarily, but
I wouldn't say you get POV shots from him, but it just looks normal. It's not like they do the Terminator or RoboCop, like the crosshairs moving and the data text going up the side, and they don't do any of that.
Sure, yeah.
This could be Michael Myers walking around with this POV shot.
That's fair.
I didn't realize it was. I mean, honestly, like it explains all of the color in the movie when I realized who the director was, because it's a very colorful film. There's a lot of lighting, and some of it's explained because there's a lot of Christmas lights, but then some of it is just also randomly got neon lighting in places and stuff. So I actually, I quite like the movie too. I think it's my favorite of his films actually, because I think both VFW and Bliss, I like the idea of, but both of them kind of were disappointing and kind of felt like they plodded a bit for me. This, I think, because the premise is so much more simple, and it's just the killer robot is killing people, and it becomes a chase down with the quote unquote final girl, with some build up to build who the character is beforehand. I think it works well in that capacity. The kills, they're a bit hit and miss, but some of them are quite fun, and there's practical effects to give them a bit of like fun, over the top poppiness. There's some synth music, there's a lot of colourful lighting. I did not have the "this is an ex-girlfriend of mine" problem with the main character. I mean, I'm not going to say that I necessarily like everything about the main character and her love interest Robbie. Like Tori and Robbie are the two main characters, and they work at a music store, and there's a lot of talk of metal and music stuff like that. They're definitely music nerds, but they're also like maybe movie nerds, and they also talk a lot about sex. There's a lot of sex talk throughout.
Yeah, the thing that was like annoying about it is that like every conversation was like basically like boiling down to like some type of like competition or some type of argument about either like a music or a movie or like something where they're like, you like this thing, oh no, like you're an idiot, like no, this is the best, whatever, blah blah blah. It definitely like got to a point where I was like, okay, I could use like less of this, like I don't know, maybe like 30% less or something of that kind of dialogue or whatever.
I think to its credit, I think it feels very natural with them, and I guess the two actors have some chemistry, and like I can imagine like a lesser version of this movie where this is grating to sit through this, but the actual back and forth was quick, and it was witty enough that it always felt like they were never annoying me as characters. And I don't want to spoil anything because we're going to be recording even more streams this week, but I watched the movie the other day, and the characters were insufferable, and you're going to hear me rage against them.
Oh my gosh.
And I think a similar thing here, what I'd compare them to here is that I don't think these people in this movie are necessarily exactly the sort of people that I would want to be around, but they were fun enough in a movie to be around with their back and forth that it does take a little while. It's about half the movie before they really get involved in the actual horror plot. Up until that, it's just kind of cutting between them and the build up to the Santa and so on. But for the most part, I thought they had decent chemistry. I thought the acting was solid from at least the main two. I didn't even realize it when I was watching it, but Jonah from Mystery Science Theater 3000 in your version has got a small role in this.
Yeah.
So you see him briefly. But by and large, though, once it really kicks off and it's just kind of this, like, unstoppable killing machine type movie, that, yeah, there is parts of it that remind me a bit of Terminator. And if anything, I'm kind of pleased they do, because I feel like sometimes it's just a budget thing and they can't do anything decent with, like, the visuals or whatever. But sometimes I feel like some movies will try to avoid certain things with robots because they don't want to feel like they're copying Terminator or other movies like that. And I'm like, no, I want to see the Santa have some of its skin ripped off so I can see what it looks like. I want to see these and it does feel kind of Terminator the way it all plays out, but you know what, that's okay, right? It's been a while. I'm here for a killer robot Santa, and so obviously it's a little bit sci-fi. Ultimately, I would still argue it feels more like a horror movie, because it only really feels sci-fi to me once, like, we're seeing, like, parts of the skeleton and stuff, and we're seeing, like, the green laser eyes. Like, that to me is when it's like, okay, it's starting to feel a bit sci-fi now. But otherwise, it's a horror movie. It
felt like slashery to me.
It's a slasher movie. It just happens to have a sci-fi looking killer by the time you get towards the end of the movie. No. I mean, if I'm going to make some, critiques here or there, is that I would say that pretty much anyone who's not the main two characters that's introduced are so wafer thin and they're just there to be killed off, which I don't necessarily mind, but it is almost a bit comical how there's some characters who are introduced and they're already in danger, kind of thing. There's like a lot of that, as opposed to, like, other than maybe the sheriff, there's very few people who are set up early on to then have it be paid off later when they're possibly killed, as most people in the movie are.
If you could save one character from the movie, who would you save?
I'd have to spoil who dies to answer that.
This is a segment called Pete's Lifeline.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, without spoiling who dies, the only thing I can say for sure is not the kid.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's just, he's got the Christmas vibes. There's a lot of walking through snow, Christmas lights everywhere. Obviously Santa the killer, adds a lot of Christmasiness to it. So
yeah, I like the atmosphere of it a lot. Like, it does remind me of, like, the holidays when it's like everything is kind of like closed down and people are like at home. Like, I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if they specifically said like what the date was, but
yeah, Christmas Eve.
It was Christmas Eve. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I kind of like that feeling of, like, even though there's times where they're like, running out into the streets and stuff, like, it feels very empty because, like, yeah, obviously everyone's going to be at home, sleeping, for getting ready for Christmas and stuff. Yeah, I mean, so I kind of like that feeling of, like, that isolation and the and it looked good with, like, all the snow and stuff when all, like, the outside stuff.
Yeah, well, it's obviously still relatively low budget. It doesn't feel like it's so low budget that they couldn't have some interesting effects and like, they always have snow falling, which obviously they're doing. They're dropping fake snow to have this these scenes out in the street. So it feels like it has some money behind it to at least be able to achieve some basic movie stuff. And I think what you're saying about the setting and the mood of just having like I think part of it is that our two main characters are these two 20 something, maybe early 30 something, kind of not losers, but like they're not family people. They don't have spouses. They don't have kids. They work in this kind of alternative like music store as a job. They're kind of these metalheads who don't really care about Christmas that well. At least she doesn't care about Christmas that much. And it's kind of like giving you it from this perspective. It was almost kind of refreshing to see. Oh, here's just a Christmas where there's two people who want to get drunk and have sex, as opposed to the dad's coming home for Christmas and he get home in time with the present before he's stabbed in the head by Santa, or So, and I guess it's also kind of refreshing that it's not teenagers, because I feel like that tends to be the typical go-to with these things.
Sure.
So that's also kind of nice. Yeah, I had a good time. Like I don't think it's an amazing movie, but it's probably my favorite that I've seen of Joe Begos or Begos, or however you say his name. So,
And I mean, in terms of like newer Christmas horror movies, I feel like this is probably the best one we've gotten in a while.
yeah, that's probably fair. I don't even know what the. I mean, Rare Exports was 2011. That one's quite good. Krampus, obviously 2015.
I can't think of like much else. Like, other than like the Black Christmas remake, but
yeah, like there's been some that we've been okay with, like, you know, we've been kind of muted on, like, you know, like the one with the kid who's the villain, like that, you know, that's all right.
Sure.
I think that's better watch out. But
oh yeah.
I would say this is more of a complete package for me than that, because it just looks better as a movie.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like a movie that wants to feel like a movie, rather than just, you know, look like a made for TV like Hallmark thing that happens to have a horror element in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I would agree with that. Obviously, Dial Code Santa Claus is amazing, but it's not actually new. We just we just discovered it in the last couple of years, but it's not a new film at all.
I'm curious why. I mean, this is obviously like an American movie, but I don't know why they gave it such a British title.
You realise the word bloody, while in the context of saying, oh, bloody hell, is very British. Saying something is bloody because it's got blood coming out of it, like a person, you look bloody. That is a word that Americans can and will use in the right context.
Not this American.
I mean, obviously the title's referencing Sunday Bloody Sunday. So, you know.
Okay.
why are you so confused by that?
Sure.
Have you never heard of the U2 song Sunday Bloody Sunday?
Probably.
Well, it's okay, Tim.
You know, I'm not much of a rocker, you know.
Oh, of course not. Actually, one of the things I want to talk about, so they're having a conversation about movies at one point in this. That I think it's okay to talk about this in spoiler free, because it's just like a, you know, random conversation they're having that has no bearing on anything. And he's kind of giving her shit. So Robbie's giving Tori shit because she's saying that Pet Sematary 2 is better than Pet Sematary 1. Now, I've never seen Pet Sematary 2, so I don't know how crazy or not. Like, the points she makes in her argument are compelling to me. She's saying it's got a better Clancy Browns in it. She says there's better music. I don't know. I don't know the music well enough to say one way or the other. But they then go on this like thing where he starts quick firing like you know, franchises, and she says which one she thinks is the best. And the bone I have to pick here is not so much that she has pretty weird taste in movies and she likes Freddy's Dead as the best Nightmare on Elm Street, because what the hell, woman, clearly go see therapy. But my problem with this is that in this list of franchises, which includes Alien, and she says Alien Covenant, which, what the hell, Nuker from Orbit.
Yeah, I don't.
That was terrible. But in this list of franchises, he says Child's Play, and she says Child's Play 2, which is actually the best Child's Play movie, and I am mad at the movie for implying that anyone who thinks Child's Play 2 is equal to someone who thinks Alien Covenant is the best Alien movie. What's wrong with you, Joe? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like very clearly like during this scene, like you could tell like, oh, this isn't the character's opinion. This is like the director very much wants to let it be known like these are the movies he likes. It didn't feel like natural for the character. I'm glad you brought it up because yeah, I was gobsmacked with that Pet Sematary 2 line, because I think Pet Sematary 2 is garbage. I mean, if we watch it, maybe there's a chance that you'll like it more because you didn't really like the first one. But
yeah. The bar's pretty low for me in terms of that. Yeah.
But I mean, as someone that likes the first one quite a deal, I think the second one is pretty bad. I do agree Clancy Brown is good. I mean, when is he not? But yeah, I mean, everything else surrounding it though is pretty horrendous, I think.
I do think it felt natural when they're talking about Pet Sematary, because it was like, oh, this is a weird movie to be having this debate over. So I appreciate that it's not just, you know, like Empire Strikes Back is better than Star Wars, you know, like it's something a bit more obscure. It's when it gets into the rapid fire where it kind of feels like, okay, someone wanted to get a bunch of weird opinions into the script.
Yeah, like that feels like a kind of a weird niche thing that someone might bring up, and then like yeah, Alien Covenant just it sounds like very bizarre. Like then you're just trolling. It seems like.
Maybe he is trolling. Maybe he's just doing it to be funny. Like that could be the case.
Possibly. Yeah.
I can't believe Joe likes Alien Covenant. That's just madness.
Yeah. I mean, especially like if you like it, that's fine. But to put it above like, you know, the original and Aliens, and I mean, I'd say even like Alien 3 and, you know, like Resurrection are like way above it. Like
hell, that's Prometheus.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't like Prometheus, but I wouldn't put Alien Covenant above it.
Yeah.
So, AVP even. I mean, AVP 2. You've got an interesting debate. AVP Requiem versus Alien Covenant. Yeah, Alien Covenant might be better actually. Like, okay. That's the one where I might draw the line. But other than that, yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it. But was AVP Requiem, was that a Christmas movie?
No, I don't think so.
No, okay.
Maybe you're making me doubt myself now. Maybe it is, because I think it's like a California town, so it's definitely no snow. But I don't know if there might be like a scene with there's like a Christmas tree in a house. Now you're saying it to me, but I don't remember.
Yeah, it's been forever since I watched it, and Lord knows I'm not in any mood to rewatch again. But yeah, I was trying to remember if it was like, I don't know why it just popped into my head, but I'm like trying to think like, oh, like Christmas lights and stuff. Was that a Christmas movie? I don't know. Who cares?
I mean, I have reviewed that movie twice now, so I am done. I am done ever watching it ever again. It's terrible. I would say a lot of the worst things I've ever had to watch for a review were for Streams After Midnight, because we've watched some crap. But AVP 2 is like, might have a lot of them beat. You know, there's only a few things that we've done on here that are worse than that movie. Rough going. But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of style to this, which boils down to kind of witty characters walking through like snowy like streets with all the neon lights and Christmas lights hitting them. It gives a lot of the kill scenes later, like the sort of bathed in green or red or sometimes other colors, but those are the two main ones that obviously pop up because it's Christmas. So yeah, I had a good time. I would recommend it as a fun little slasher movie with some fun practical stuff towards the end when it comes to the Santa himself. So I think he looks kind of cool once like some of them's like been ripped away.
Oh yeah, totally. So because like even because like yeah, before that he doesn't look very like robot-y. Like he kind of looks like just a guy in a Santa costume.
Yeah, that's the weird thing.
Which is not necessarily bad, but
yeah, it's kind of weird that the military apparently has actually perfected Terminators.
Yeah. Hey, I believe it.
I mean, he's walking a little robotically, of course, but that's pretty much it. He does like the axe though. He does keep he kills people in a variety of ways, but he keeps going back for that axe. He loves having that axe as his go-to weapon.
Yeah.
You know, Jason's got the machete, Michael's the butcher knife, Freddy's got the glove, and Santa's got the axe. Him and Jack Torrance love that axe.
Got an axe to grind.
I actually kind of love that there's like no even real reason why the Santa haywires. You just hear in the news at one point that some of these Santas are malfunctioning and reverting to their prior like military programming, and I'm like, what military program is just kill everything in sight?
Yeah.
I mean, what were they doing with these robots? Were they just like sort of like airlifting them into like enemy territory and going, right, go nuts, just murder everything?
I mean, honestly, it doesn't sound. I wouldn't put that past our country to develop something like that.
Well, I don't know, but that's the gist of things. I suppose we give the spoiler warning so we can talk about the movie in detail, talk about all the various sequences and kills and things. So I do like that it starts off with Tori like getting to it. She's like, I mean, I think obviously she must have been there before, but she's like sort of arriving back at work, dropping off like some extra vinyl or whatever, and that's the start of the movie, and that's how we're introduced to her and like Robbie who works for her, I do kind of like that the movie starts there and then ends there, like, you know, because we go through like a whole journey, like to eventually go to her place, which is where the chaos really starts, and then it kind of works its way back to eventually get into the music store again. I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah.
A music store which still stocks VHS tapes, I noticed.
Well, yeah, you almost wonder if it's if they did that on purpose, because it's almost like, circular, like, you start where you end up, and it's a circle, like a record.
Bless you for trying, Tim, but I think you might be reading into something a bit too much there.
Also, I'm sorry, but VHS is making a comeback. I think people are getting kind of sick of these Blu-rays or whatever you call them, and we're going back to a superior format.
I think people have switched to digital and streaming now, Tim. I don't think they're going back the way.
Some people are going back.
Hey, you know what? HD VHS, it's a shame that that never took off. Because the results were very good for its time, from what I hear.
Really?
Did you even know HD VHS existed?
I did not know. That's interesting, though.
Yeah, it's called DVHS. It was basically digital tape. So when DVD was coming out, you could actually get movies in 1080 on digital tape. But obviously at the time, like, the TVs that would play HD were so expensive and hard to find. The tape players were so expensive that it just basically, like, Blu-ray was coming and it was going to offer even more for even cheaper and even easier. So it just never took off. But yeah,
interesting.
You've learned something today.
Well, it's an educational podcast.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, so. Yeah. Not that I think they were stocking DVHS or D Theater, as it was also called. Well, D Theater was like a sort of format within the format. I don't want to get into it. It's just too much to explain. But the point is that there was this format that kind of just never really took off, which I understand why, but hey, we're here now, and it's cool to think about.
Yeah.
Love the enthusiasm. So, all
I'm gonna say is, if an intruder breaks into my home and I have a VHS in one hand and a DVD in the other, I'm throwing the VHS at him.
Aye, and it'll break it, so the DVD's more valuable to you.
I mean, I'd rather go with the thing that saves my life than.
Aye, because it's chunkier and heavier, so you get a better chance of killing someone with it. Although, if you snap the DVD in half, you could probably stab them with it.
That's a good point.
That plastic's sharp, Go for the jugular. So anyway, we start the movie at the music store and introduces it, and they're closing up for the night. Someone that she knows is like it's Jonah from Mr. Science Theater is buying like a vinyl for his girlfriend, who's also friends with her, and like she gives him a record or whatever. And this is where we really start the sort of the chemistry and the, like, she's going to meet a guy on Christmas Eve, which is kind of a weird time to go on like a blind Tinder date. And we get a extended sort of conversation because Robbie, when he sees the picture of the guy, recognizes him, and he's in this local band and he's got 4 kids, and there's just lots and lots of jokes about like her potentially having sex with this guy because he's kind of a loser, and various things of that nature. I don't know, what did you think of all the introductory stuff?
Yeah, no, I thought it was mostly good. It felt like very, like, I don't want to say necessarily like natural, because there was like, a movie-ish quality to it, but yeah, it doesn't feel like, to the point where it was, like unrealistic or something, and like, we very quickly get to know like the characters and kind of understand their deal.
They have chemistry, and I think the main thing is that it is very quick. It's constantly they're constantly talking, and not so much in an annoying way, where it feels like they're not actors who are stopping to like think of their lines. Like they are firing back and forth like it's a conversation, and they're making fun of each other as much as they possibly can. They are a bit maybe overly like innuendo at times. Like they're constantly talking about like, oh, this guy's dick, or he says at one point, oh, like come and have a drink with me and just go home and flip your bean. I think is the sentence that he said at one point.
I forget who it was, but I think I saw someone on like Twitter or something who compared Joe to like basically being like kind of like Rob Zombie, but if he actually had like talent and like made stuff that was watchable. And it's kind of, it sounds like kind of an odd comparison, but I can kind of see that like especially like in the dialogue and stuff, because it does get like a little raunchy, or maybe like another comparison I could kind of see is like almost like Kevin Smith in a way or something. But the difference between like those other directors though is it actually like feels like more natural, and it usually doesn't get like grating or something like where a lot of those other characters from those movies can be.
They definitely feel a little bit like indie movie characters, but I think they feel natural enough that it doesn't just feel like, they don't just feel like caricatures, even though they are very much like defined by these types of people who talk about these types of things constantly. They still feel natural enough that it doesn't feel too forced, at least not to me anyway. But I think as it progresses and they're making more jokes about having sex, they're making more jokes about their friends who are like the couple that they're going to see briefly, Jonah from Mystery Science Theater and his girlfriend. Or at least she works in this toy store where the Santa comes from, and they want to have sex in the toy store. That's just what they're going to do this is one of these movie things actually, and I'm sure I'm sure tons of people like. I remember there being like a survey at one point, and it was something like 30% of people have had sex at work, and I'm like, that is actually really high. Like, that's a really high figure for people to have had sex at work. Yikes. So like I totally believe it kind of happens, but at the same time it's such a horror movie trope to me. Even like other Christmas horror movies, like Silent Night Deadly Night, it's a toy store, and it's like the people who work there like saying, oh, we should stay back and have a party in a toy store, or something like Chopping Mall, let's have a party in the department store. Like, why? You're adults, you can just go and do something somewhere else. I mean, maybe there were teenagers in that, I don't know, but they all look like they were 30, so it's tough to gauge. So it's this, there's kind of this just a different vibe to it, because they're not pretending to be like any younger than they actually are. It does kind of feel like oh, these are not necessarily like I say, they're not losers because they've got like a sort of simple job, and but like it kind of feels like they intentionally pick some characters who are more like, oh, these are typical millennials who are they don't make a lot of money, but they like debating these like silly things. They care about music and movies and stuff.
They talk about like pop culture. They go get drunk after work, and they like to have sex. Like, that's it sounds like young people to me.
But these two have not had sex yet, which is the movie's makes clear. In fact, the other couple, when they're alone, are making bets with each other if they're going to actually have sex that night. And it's a movie, so it feels like inevitable that they're going to. Then they get interrupted, obviously, because there's shenanigans going on, but at the very least they're going to start down that path, leading to the bean that's going to be flipped, or was it? No, it was flicked. It was flick the bean, not flip the bean. Flick the bean.
That's one of those phrases I have no idea where that came from.
I've never heard it before, which is why I'm really hammering it, no pun intended. There is some movie things though, because when they do get back to her place eventually, which is after they've seen their friends and they've went to the bar with been introduced to the sheriff, and then they walk back to his car. I thought that was funny. Like the bartender's like, hey, like, are you okay to drive? And she's like, no, definitely not. And Robbie's like, yeah, I'll take her home. And I'm like, you've been drinking just as much as she had. I don't understand. This is like a really movie thing where like people who have been drinking all night, there's like one who's somehow still just sober enough that it's not implausible they might drive, and like in real life, no. Like, you can't drive. Are you kidding me? Like, you should be arrested on the spot for trying to drive with the amount of booze you've been knocking back all night. But when they get back to hers and they finally have it's like right after fact, I think it's at the end of the movie conversation. It's like I think it's actually after the Alien Covenant thing where they both down a drink and start kissing.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I think that's actually when they start. But like the actual sexual encounter is him going down on her, which is like sort of like a payoff to like some dialogue earlier where she's saying no men are good at it, and he's like, I beg to differ. There's just a couple of movie like details to this that kind of stick out. Is that she's clearly still got her underwear on, and it's implied that he's kind of pulling it down, but it still kind of feels like it's still there the whole scene, and I'm just like, this is impractical. And then as it goes on, like, and this is just a constant movie thing, but there's like no like cleanup or no like, you know, he just kind of rolls over and like everything's fine, and like they start drinking again.
I feel like that's I feel like that's like movie logic or whatever. Like
it really is. No one ever like people just finish sex in movies and just like go to sleep, and it's like skip it out.
Yeah, that's right.
I try to say that as silly as I possibly could. Oh dear. But yeah, so yeah, and you know, obviously while they're at the bars, it starts cutting between them and the other couple at the toy store, which is when the Santa comes to life and goes after them. The first kill is pretty gnarly. Like the Santa, like just sort of like brings the axe down and splits the guy in like half from the top down.
That's cool. Yeah.
Whilst he's having sex, which I must note some of the dialogue actually when he's walking towards them. The guy who's behind his wife / girlfriend, I can't remember what their exact relationship status was in the movie, but Jonah's yelling something to the effect of, "Christmas does come early. Christmas does come early," and then she's like, "Don't you dare, don't you dare," and then the Santa axes him. I mean, it was a funny line. I'm not like.
Yeah, I liked it.
It's like he's proud of it, which is really weird in the context. But you know, whatever. I don't know. It gave me a chuckle. Her death isn't as amazing. She just gets her head bashed in, basically, against something, but. It's all right. But this is all like cutting between them and the main couple at the bar, and it builds kind of a rhythm out of that. And then because the Santa sees them like driving home, there's not much of an explanation, but I guess the idea is that because he sees someone moving in that direction, he follows that direction, and that leads him to her street. You know, so Tori and Robbie are at her place. And she just casually mentions, like right before they go in, that her sister and her sister's husband are staying with her. So they have to try and not wake them up. And they are constantly playing music.
Oh, yeah.
And there's not even like a hint that they've woken anyone up. And then eventually, when to the point where I was thinking, are they really there? But later on, yeah, they run in when like, all the shenanigans start, and like they wake them up so they can get up and get killed.
Yeah.
I was like, did you two really not wake up whilst they were playing like heavy metal in the other room?
Yeah, I had a little trouble kind of getting like the layout of the house, because I assumed that they were like in the basement or something, but then I think at one point it looked like they were coming downstairs. So I was I was kind of like a little confused about the actual logistics of the house or whatever. But
this might just be another movie thing where, like, given like their employment, that this house is far too big for what she should feasibly be able to afford. But you know, whatever.
Maybe I missed it, but I thought she was staying at her sister's. I thought it was the other way around, but I don't know. It could be.
No, I think it was the sister and that were coming, because at one point when they're getting woken up, the brother-in-law yells out, "I didn't even want to come here anyway."
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
yeah, that is weird then, because that does seem like a pretty nice place for.
I mean,
if you're just working at a record store,
that is a constant like flaw in movies and TV. I mean, like I say, if this is some shithole like middle of nowhere town, you know, like maybe it is quite cheap to like buy or rent a house where she lives. I don't know.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't claim to know the economy, although it still is 2022. So you know, everywhere is more expensive. But so the Santa like kills like an entire like house of neighbors. the dad gets killed. The Santa comes in, and it's actually a pretty good death. Like I didn't think it was at first, because he just gets like axed in the back, and I was like, oh, you didn't really see it, and he's just kind of walking around, or he's crawling with an axe in his back. But then Santa like curb stomps him into the stairs, and you see like a prosthetic or model head go smoosh, and I'm like, all right, okay, all right, that was not bad. No, yeah, into it. And then the I think it was the wife, maybe, or older daughter, I'm not sure, gets chased into the bathroom and killed.
I assumed wife, yeah.
Yeah, because then there's a little boy who comes out and is wondering where his parents are, and he's basically sneaking a look at his presents when Santa comes a knocking, and this is when finally our main character like sees it from the window, like the kid being murdered, and is like, shit, there's like a murderer across the street, and starts yelling and screaming and getting everyone involved.
I really liked this scene. In fact, like this probably like little stretch was probably like my favorite of the whole movie. Yeah, just the way like it shows her like looking through the blinds, and then kind of seeing it, and like I like the fear of like, oh crap, like did they see me, and then like it's like I gotta look again, because I gotta know if they're still there, if they're looking at me or whatever, but like you're too scared to, like, you don't really want to do anything, and then like just like nervously like trying to wake everyone up, and then like when you kind of start to hear like the Santa walking like around their house and stuff, as a lot of stuff here that I thought was really good, and especially like this is where it starts to feel like really slashery, which is cool.
Oh yeah, this is where it really kind of picks up. I mean, there was obviously the couple in the toy store got killed, but that was like, that was fairly early on, and it's been a little while since then. This is where it starts to really ramp up the pace of things. And I appreciate as well that for a good while, Tori never actually thinks it's a robot or says it's a robot. In fact, when she speaks to a cop eventually, she says, "Oh, like it looks like the Santa that was in the toy store. I think maybe this guy's like taking his clothes or something." Like she rationalizes it in a way that makes enough logical sense. Because I'm not going to say this is a grounded movie or a realistic movie by any means, but it doesn't like really hammer on the cheesiness of its unrealism. It kind of it approaches it relative and takes it seriously enough that you just kind of go with it. And I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, you have to be willing to watch a movie about a killer robot Santa. Like, you have to be in the, in the in the mood for that. You have to go in accepting that. But so like the Santa comes for them. We see that the silhouette come up to the window and like smash through. I did laugh that the brother-in-law runs away when his wife gets grabbed. The sister gets grabbed and the brother-in-law just like goes and runs away, and the sister's neck just gets snapped.
Oof.
It's probably the least interesting death from like a horror movie perspective, because it is just like a neck snap, but it's visceral, and it kind of like it punctuates the scene quite well. And the Robbie almost gets it a couple times. The brother-in-law gets it quite quickly. And they get out to his car, which is like a station wagon that like has trouble starting, so they're struggling, and they end up crashing like down, because she lives on like a hill, and she ends up crashing into some other neighbor's car, and the neighbor comes out and is like yelling at her like, I'm going to phone the police, you've ruined my car, you bitch. And
and this was funny.
Yeah, well, I actually thought the shot of like, because like they're too scared to get out the car, and they're yelling at him that it's dangerous, and he's just mad about his car, and he's got his phone out, he's going to phone the police. So we get this shot from inside the car looking at, it's basically behind our protagonist looking out the window, and the snow's coming down heavy, and you just see Santa like walking out the snow in the background, and like, so you don't really see him until he's like a couple of feet away from this guy. So it looks quite good. And then, he obviously axes him a question.
Yes.
What? I can have jokes too.
Very good.
Thank you. And then Santa just like axes the windshield, rips it off, and then just pulls Robbie out. And Robbie, he's trying to like get away, but like he gets his death's quite good actually, because it is just an axing again, but he gets axed right in the face. Like we see his face, much like the guy who gets curb stopped on the steps. Like we see the axe go into this like prosthetic head, because he's sort of like sitting next to the car at this point, and the axe goes all the way through to hit the car. So it's like his face gets sliced in half.
And it's pretty surprising too, because like Yeah, I don't think I necessarily would have been shocked if he died in the movie, but kind of would have thought that he'd like at least make it more towards the end.
Yeah, this is probably just after the halfway mark when he dies. I guess it's to sell that the threat is real and to leave her like on her own kind of thing because I don't necessarily think that I don't know if this movie's got like a lot of subtext to it or anything. Like I'm trying to think of like if there's anything that like I don't know, like her like refusing to like accept this like prospective partner who she clearly gets on with in front of her for so long, and then just as she's actually finally ready to like sort of take the chance, it all goes to shit. I don't know if it, because I think it is just no. We have relatively entertaining, likable characters, and then there's going to be a killer Santa robot, and that's just all it is, and that's fine. But my analytical mind tries to see if there's anything more than that, and I don't necessarily think there is, and that's okay. But yeah. So, but the reason why I'm bringing it up here specifically is just because I was like, it's like a big dramatic reason, other than just like the shock death of like killing him this early on. I don't know.
Yeah, not sure.
But it's at this point though, because the other guy called the cops, though, like a cop car pulls up and the officer gets out, and immediately like this killer Santa's like pulling an axe out of someone's face, so he just starts shooting them with his shotgun, and he thinks he's dead. And Tori's like, check, make sure he's dead. And he's like, it's okay, ma'am, calm down. Although I think she knows him by name because I think it's just a small enough town that like there's only 3 cops and she knows them all by name. And like, of course, the Santa gets up. He shoots him again, but then the cop gets killed pretty, violently. He gets like a shotgun blast to the face, and we get the blood spatter all over the car. Santa's not going to discriminate against other weapons. Like he'll use other weapons if they're ready at hand. This is important. So Tori, in a bid to try and get away, drives the cop car and tries to just get out as far away as possible, but ultimately runs into like the ambulance that's been called to the scene of the crimes, as well as the other cop car, and immediately the bigger cop, like the chubbier cop, arrests her and takes her in because she's covered in blood. She's driving like his colleague's like police car, so she's taken to the station and all that stuff, where no one, like, they don't necessarily think she's killed anyone, but they don't necessarily believe her crazy story either. Because I guess at this point, I think this is right around this part of the movie where the Santa, because he gets shot in the face with a shotgun, there is a bit of like a green glow to his chin. Like there's like some, it's broken through some of the skin a little bit.
It looks cool.
Yeah. So.
And I do like that like the cops, like, I feel like most movies, like, they would go the route of like, oh, you're clearly crazy and you killed these people, so we're gonna lock you up, and then she'd be in like a jail cell or whatever. But I like that this movie doesn't do that. Instead, like, they're talking to her, and like you said, they're like, okay, like, we know you didn't kill any people, but come on, what the hell? Like, you're covered in blood, you're telling this crazy story. I do think it was kind of weird that like they had like 2 cop characters with kind of just like insane crazy mustaches. Like,
I mean, it was easy to tell them apart because the one who wasn't the sheriff was much like more overweight, so it was easy to tell them apart. But you're right, they had very, very similar, like, the long sort of what would you call it? Not quite that's not handlebar, but like
kind of like
like the full mustache that goes down to the chin. Very extreme. I think it does dodge a few tropes actually, because like I think like the way that the sheriff like interacts with the couple when he meets them in the bar, like he is very standoffish and like sort of acts like Robbie could be trouble and warns her against him. But it sort of felt like at that point it was setting up this thing where later on he's going to think Robbie's the killer and try and arrest him, and that's going to be like an obstacle where he's in handcuffs for a while or something like that. And instead, like, he still buys them some drinks at the bar. And then here he's very calm with Tori and sort of says he's obviously not ready or prepared for any of this, but he's like, no, I don't think you killed anyone, but like there's questions that need to be answered here. There's stuff we have to look at and investigate and so on and so on. I think it kind of dodged a few obvious things that I think a lot of other horror movies do, which is have the sheriff who doesn't trust the main character, very Friday the 13th Part 6 kind of thing. Something like that. or this idea. Like I was really expecting when the bigger cop handcuffed her, I thought like Santa was going to like get back into the mix while she was still handcuffed, and that was going to be like the new obstacle is that she's in handcuffs trying to get away from him now to make it even more tense and more, and that would be fine. But like I've seen a lot of movies do that where like the character is eventually put in handcuffs and now they have to get away in that predicament. So it was kind of, I mean, eventually Santa just shows up. He drives the ambulance. He's clearly killed the ambulance driver and the other cop, and he drives the ambulance into the side of the station, and the cops go out to deal with it, and both the cops get killed in a matter of like a minute. It's really not that long at all. But you know, again, practically looks quite good. You know, shotgun blast to the face. The other, that's one of them anyway. I can't remember if the other one died, but you know, there's a decent amount of death. So I mean, it's not so much that the death wasn't good. It was just there's a lot of them by this point. So
yeah, it's pretty bloody.
Well, it's in the title, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so that is, you know, so we're kind of at this like final act of the movie where she's on her own. She runs out to the ambulance. She's taking a shotgun, and hell, even the sheriff gave her a handgun at this point when they showed up, because like how serious all this feels. And she drives off in the ambulance, but the Santa gets on the back of the ambulance, so she ends up like having to pull the brakes, and the robot Santa goes flying out the windshield onto the ground, and then she drives over him, or she drives into the car that she hit, and sort of like traps the Santa by having so she sort of knocks the car onto his arm so the Santa can't like move, and she like, you know, lights a bit of a shirt on fire, puts it in the you know, the fuel cap thing of the car, and it blows up. And this is where it feels really Terminator, this last like 15 minutes, because the idea that an explosion like melts away not all but some of his like skin and like shows you some of the metal skeleton. And we get this great looking thing where they not only is the like laser eyes like light up, they actually have lasers. So he's got these like green beams like whenever he's walking around. So it looks really kind of cool, and it's a bit low budget, but it's got like a charm to it. You know, it feels like a really charmful like indie sci-fi robot walking around. I kind of dug it. So, and you know, it gets up, still keeps coming after her, chases her into the music store, where she tries a variety of things. There's a lot of her hiding and him stalking around all the shelves and stuff, but ultimately she turns on the sprinklers to try and like get him to short circuit. She tases him, ultimately takes like a sword prop off the wall and stabs him with that, and like moves it around a bit to see if that can do the job. Like, which I think that's actually what ultimately does it. Although I think he's crawling after that. He's still crawling in the ground, which again is very Terminator. He's crawling in the ground, coming after her. But like, it's tough to sort of like say in words why this last 10 minutes is fun, because it is just a lot of this cool robot like stalking her around this very tight like space. But I don't know. Did you enjoy this last chunk?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it definitely feels like, you know, the action is getting ramped up a lot. And yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, we've been with the character long enough that, you know, do definitely appreciate like her ingenuity. Like, you know, she's trying a lot of different things, which, yeah, like kudos, you know, a lot of them, you know, seems to work, like at least like little by little. You know, I kind of like that's not just like one big thing that destroys it, but I don't know, just like, you know, she's just trying like more and more different stuff.
Yeah, it's whittled down. Although she does get a couple of injuries herself. She like her ankle like snaps or whatever when she's like jumping out of the car, and then she gets like 3 of her fingers chopped off. Like,
oof.
I think it's when the water turns on. Like he's still sort of swinging the axe and ends up like chopping off like 3 of her fingers. So she's like hobbling around. And she's like holding her hand, like she is completely and utterly messed up by the end, you know. So she already kind of hated Christmas, but she especially hates Christmas now. So yeah, but she like, you know, the movie ends with her like coming out in slow motion of the store, and it's finally daylight, and she sort of lies there and smiles as the freeze frames, then the credits hit, and it's like, you know, it's kind of a fun ride of a movie. That is definitely slow in the start to kind of like kick up, but it does a decent job like building like who the characters are for that first chunk.
Yeah, and the movie's not super long, so
Oh no, it's
yeah, like once the action starts going, like it's pretty nonstop.
yeah, it's 85 minutes, and I think the intention with the like the continual, because it's all set in one night, right? We're introduced to the characters at like 6 p.m. or whatever time, or 5 p.m. whenever this record store is going to close, and it just goes from there. And it's not in real time, obviously, but you kind of get that vibe where like the first part of it almost felt like an indie rock version of like a Before Sunrise, where it's just these like this man and a woman talking, and they're clearly into each other, and it's building up to when they're eventually going to like sort of admit that to themselves and do something with it. Not saying it's as well written as that, or like it's compelling, but it does a decent enough job with it enough so that like I felt like there were movie characters, and they weren't just like blank slates when the Santa was coming after them. Every other character, admittedly, does feel like a blank slate, because they're like the sister and the brother-in-law. They're introduced like they're woken up out of bed and they're dead within like 90 seconds or something like that. It's so quick. And then the neighbors, like the sheriff's the only one who's sort of introduced early on and then brought back later to be killed. But props to the bartender, he made it out alive. He didn't come back.
That's true.
He just went home to his kids and got up early for Christmas. It's fine.
Yeah,
easy peasy. Yeah, but yeah, a lot of neon light, a lot of Christmas lights. So all constantly look quite good. There was some synth music playing at times, which I enjoyed as well. Built some mood. It'd be very easy, and like the temptation to just put in Christmas music is probably there, but they kind of chose to not do that, and I think it maybe makes it stick out against other Christmas movies because of that.
Sure.
But the visuals are constantly so Christmassy that you never forget, you never don't feel it. And hell, even the characters, when they're talking about which sort of Christmas like movies and songs they like, they're kind of mostly picking like obscure stuff that isn't like the mainstream. At one point she even complains that America's too obsessed with The Christmas Story, and shows her dislike of it, her disapproval. So but I had a good time.
That's fun.
Yeah. It's just simple. I don't think there's a lot under the surface. I think it's just a stylish slasher movie with a killer robot Santa who I won't say ever like has like such a great presence that he's going to be like remembered as like a great horror movie villain, but the robot, once you see more of him like sort of like stripped down at the end, does look pretty fun and cool, and like I totally watch this again.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a good time. So it comes with a fairly, reasonable recommendation. Not like an over the moon thing. Don't expect high art, and don't expect like the next Black Christmas. I mean, I say that. I mean the original. Not there's been multiple Black Christmases at this point, but
yeah. I mean, like if you look at the title and you look at the description, like Killer Robot Santa, like I feel like you kind of know what you're in for. But I mean, honestly, you might get a little bit more than like the typical
it could have been much worse,
cheesy
though.
horror fare, but
because I was thinking as I was watching it could have been like what was that Nicolas Cage one that was like Five Nights at Freddy's with the animatronics?
Was something Wonderland? Was it Willy's
Wonderland? Yeah. That movie was so boring, and the characters were so just like dull to watch, and everything felt so cheap, and everything like obviously they got Nicolas Cage, but the rest of the movie takes place in a big rectangle room. This restaurant's got almost nothing in it. I think that's the sort of thing that I think this could have been like. So, which is why I'm saying it's a lot better than or it could have been a lot worse, I guess is what I'm saying. Like I think what this actually is an entertaining, good little Christmas horror movie, as opposed to because it's actually got characters in it, as opposed to like how many like straight to Shudder movies are just like kind of these bland or worse, like just really bad acting or whatever, like
well, I feel like what it is like you take what could very easily be a very cheesy like straight to Tubi kind of premise for a movie, but then you have a director who actually has like some style, and if you take that but then you inject it with some characters and some style, you get something that's a little bit more than maybe what you would expect out of something with this kind of premise.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically all it is. It's just there's some style to it, there's some fun kills and some fun practical effects, and the characters at least feel natural enough and witty enough that it doesn't feel like they're, it's not like the guy from Troll 2, like, oh my god, they're eating her and then they're going to eat me. Yeah. Oh my god, like, it's not that. And it's a fine line to walk, because sometimes, like, if sometimes when they go for natural, they end up being bland, and I don't think this does that. Yeah. I think they're enough movie-fied where they're a bit wittier than real people are, just to make them entertaining enough to get them by. So yeah, it was a decent time. I'm happy to give it a bit more of a recommendation than Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 from last week. I'll say that much. So, all right, I guess we can rate it then. Tim, what you given Christmas Bloody Christmas?
I think I'm gonna give it a 7. It's pretty fun, pretty solid. I think there's a lot to like. Again, there's some style stuff and some nice character beats. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty good. Like, I don't think it necessarily lit my world on fire, which is we're not like going crazy over it, but it is definitely a fun, solid watch, and it's on Shudder, so it's easy to watch and everything, and so definitely would recommend checking it out. Yeah,
I think I'll agree with the 7, like, which is more than I thought I was going to get. Like, I went into it thinking, this, like, if we're lucky, it's a 6, but it's probably going to be like a 4. Like, that was kind of like my attitude going in. Yeah. And I ended up being kind of impressed that it's actually taking time to introduce its characters. They're fairly witty, and and I could see them being off-putting if you just don't like these types of people. And they're not necessarily my type of people either, but like like, again, I watched a movie last week that I hated every character and wanted them to die horribly, not for the right reasons. So, props are due. It has style, which is the other thing that is nice. So, yeah, not breaking new ground, not like reinventing the wheel or blowing my mind away, but a really solid Christmas horror movie that I'm happy to add into the rotation.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I feel like there are certain movies that, like, people get excited about online, and it's like, I think a good example is like, Willy's Wonderland, like you brought up before. Like, how many times do you hear like a premise like that where people are like, oh my god, there's this new movie and it's insane, and like, this character Nick Cage is doing this and blah blah, and like, you could kind of see, like, feel like this movie maybe getting some of that, like people are like, oh my god, there's this new like crazy Christmas movie with this robot Santa that goes on a killing spree, like. But it's one that actually kind of like lived up to, like, oh yeah, no, it is like actually a decent movie where I feel like so many times, like, when you hear people getting excited about like some crazy movie with this wild premise, that it just ends up being kind of bland and dumb and doesn't really move past the premise. Yeah,
Willy's Wonderland is bland. Snakes in a Plane was pretty bland, and that was that was kind of like the earliest example of that. Is like, oh my god, there's a movie called Snakes in a Plane. Yeah. Samuel L. Jackson's going to say something about mother effing snakes and a mother effing plane. Yeah. And I saw that movie, and it was just kind of like, this is like, I thought this could be great cheesy fun, and instead it's just kind of meh.
Oh yeah, I went with I brought like a whole group of friends, and we were all like, if we had like t-shirts and like pendants, like we would have been like, shutting them out in the theater, and then we all just walked out and we're just like, it was okay, I guess. I
really thought you were going to say that you went with the ex that you were reminded of in this movie.
not that one. That was a different ex, but I did go with
Tim's racked up a lot of exes apparently.
I got a decent amount.
Gonna have to do some sort of special countdown at some point. All of Tim's all of Tim's exes ranked in order of nicest to most evil.
Yeah, all the lost loves of my life. Hey, I'm happy now though, and I think most of them are doing well. I've no ill will towards anyone.
He says that, but like just behind off camera, there's like all their photos are up on the wall with like red X's over their faces. Are the ones that he's ruined financially by like Tim's got connections. He's got people at the IRS going after them all.
Sure. Yeah.
Dump me, will you? I'll have the last laugh. No? Okay. I guess that's what Screams After Midnight, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed our Christmas episode. The bonus episode for patrons will be out just after Christmas, so it's going to be winter themed but not Christmas themed. So look forward to that if you're a patron. But yes, but otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much us. You can, of course, let us know what you thought of Christmas Bloody Christmas, and a lot of you might have watched it because it is the new release that's on Shudder, and stands to reason you might have checked it out. So go and write in the comments what you thought of the movie. You can subscribe, ding the bell, all those things help us out. As of course does go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you can support us on a monthly basis and help keep all the content coming and get some bonus content at various tiers. For not only this show, but the other shows on MailFuzz Movies like The Ace, The Atomic Cinema Experiment, the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast, and Collector's Cut, the new movie podcast that I do with David. Which has also got a Christmas batch of episodes right now. We're doing the Santa Claus movies.
Oh god.
The first 2 should be up, I think, by the time this goes out. Maybe even all 3. I'm not sure. But that is the show. That has been Screams After Midnight. So another year of Christmas episodes in the book. So hopefully you enjoyed them, and next year we'll get to Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, and maybe another 1 or 2 random ones. But this has been Christmas Bloody Christmas on Screams After Midnight. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching.
Do you think the patrons are?
Oh, the producers? Oh, okay, I suppose I should do that, Tim. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much to our Patreon producers. Thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Bornow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, Al Tradesman, and Alison M. Fordyce. And thank you to all our patrons and anyone who supports the show.
They're all on my nice list.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a podcast me daddy attitude to our patrons, so I think they'd rather be on your naughty list, Tim.
Oh my. Well, I'll see what we can do.
Okay, I'm not going to take that joke any further because it's going to go downhill very quick. But thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies. Have a Merry Christmas. And we will see you next time.